Hi traveller, welcome to my channel. Here you can relax, listen to my stories and the sound of rain, and fall asleep slowly. ASMR Sleep Story, where lavender grows wild. A bittersweet summer love story.
The gravel path was narrower than I remembered, but the lavender still grew wild on either side, swaying like it had been waiting. I parked the car by the rusted gate and stepped out, my shoes crunching softly on stones that had once echoed with my younger steps. The cottage hadn't changed much. The shutters still clung stubbornly to their hinges, one painted blue and the other faded to something like sky. Ivy curled around the porch rails, and just beyond, in that endless stretch of purple haze, the field was still breathing with wind and sunlight and memory. I stood at the fence for a while, gripping the top rail like I had done so many summers ago. My fingers brushed the weathered wood, and I could almost hear my grandmother calling from the kitchen window, asking if I'd remembered my hat. I never had. The scent hit me next warm, earthy lavender, not the bottled kind you buy in stores, but real, unruly, sun-drenched lavender that carried dust and dreams and some kind of ache I'd buried a long time ago. I wasn't sure what brought me back. Maybe it was the silence of an empty apartment. Maybe it was the shoebox I'd found while packing, still sealed with tape and time. Or maybe it was that postcard from Provence, unsigned, with only a single line. Do you still remember the scent? Yes, I remembered, and I had returned to the place where lavender grows wild, to the place where I first loved. I was 16 that summer, restless and dreaming beneath the heavy, golden heat of July. It wasn't a time of grand adventures or brilliant discoveries. No, that summer felt like it moved slowly, almost lazily, through the pages of a book I could never quite finish. I had come to the cottage to escape the noise of my city life, but I was only ever halfway there. Grandmother's house was always peaceful, the quietest place I knew, with its creaking floors and the scent of baked bread that always seemed to hang in the air. Yet the stillness seemed to stir something in me, something that wanted more than the familiar hum of country life. I spent my days wandering through the fields of lavender behind the house, feeling like I was waiting for something. Anything. The earth beneath my feet was soft, and the scent of lavender would cling to my skin. But it was all just a background to my daydreams, until one afternoon, everything changed. That was the moment I saw him, though I didn't know it then. He was standing near the edge of the field, his back to me, working with the earth. He looked like he belonged there, as if the sun and soil had made him a part of the land. There was something in his posture, something so raw and simple that it tugged at the edges of me. He wasn't like the boys back home, loud and too polished. No, he was quiet in a way that felt real, like the weight of time had shaped him. I stood there, watching from the window, unable to move. He hadn't noticed me yet, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I wanted him to. But something told me this summer wasn't going to be as quiet as I thought. He turned suddenly, catching me in his gaze. My heart jolted. A strange, sudden shock that felt both familiar and foreign. I quickly stepped away from the window, my face burning. I'd never seen him before, but in that moment, I knew I would. And I would never be the same again. The next day, I saw him again, though it wasn't like the first time. This time, he noticed me. He was walking across the field with a basket in hand, his eyes scanning the rows of lavender as if he knew every inch of it. I was still standing near the window, too afraid to go outside, but I couldn't help myself. My feet carried me toward the door before I even made a decision. I stepped onto the porch, the warm air immediately greeting me, and I looked down at the path that led to the lavender. My heart was pounding in my chest, an unfamiliar flutter that I tried to ignore. And there he was, his back turned to me again, his hands working with the plants as if he was on a mission. I couldn't help but watch him. He moved with purpose, and yet there was a quiet elegance in the way he worked, like the lavender knew him, welcomed him. I lingered there for a long while, unsure whether to approach, but then something shifted. He looked up. His gaze found mine instantly, as if he had been waiting for me to notice him. There was a brief, almost imperceptible smile that tugged at the corners of his lips, something shy, something hesitant. It made me feel like maybe, just maybe, he had been watching me too. I forced myself to step down from the porch and made my way toward him, my legs shaky under the weight of the unspoken words between us. "Hi," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, still holding the basket of lavender, his eyes soft but steady. "You're the one staying at the cottage?" "Yeah," I said, swallowing, my throat dry. I'm visiting my grandmother." He took a step toward me, his gaze flicking toward the field. "It's beautiful here, isn't it? The lavender." I nodded, more out of instinct than agreement, not sure what to say next. It was silly, really. I had no idea how to speak to him. It felt like I was seeing him for the first time, even though we'd been in the same place for weeks now. But then he surprised me. "I work here, in the gardens, helping out." His voice was low, almost a hum against the breeze that played through the lavender. I caught a hint of something in his words, maybe a reluctance, maybe a longing, but it was fleeting. He didn't want to talk about it, I could tell. "Do you like it?" I asked, trying to fill the silence. He paused, his gaze drifting back to the lavender, to the way the sunlight caught the purple blossoms, casting shadows across his face. "Yeah, it's peaceful here. I don't mind it." We stood there for what felt like an eternity, simply watching each other, not saying much else. The moment stretched, unspoken and thick with meaning, until finally he shifted. "Well," he said, looking down at his basket, "I should probably finish up." I nodded, reluctant to let the moment end. But before he turned away, he looked at me again, a flicker of something in his eyes. "Maybe I'll see you around." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest, something gentle and unexpected. "Yeah, I think you will." And with that, he was gone, disappearing back into the lavender field, leaving me standing there, my heart beating a little faster than it should. Something had shifted. Something had begun. It was a beginning I wasn't ready for but couldn't stop. It was a week before I saw him again. It wasn't planned, of course. I had been walking down to the stream to fill my water jug when I saw him again, near the edge of the field, his back to me as he worked among the lavender bushes. The day was warm, but a cool breeze rolled through, making the flowers dance and shimmer like a sea of purple waves. I hesitated, unsure if I should approach. I remembered our brief exchange, the weight of it, the quiet pull I felt each time our eyes met. But it wasn't until I accidentally knocked over my water jug that I found myself walking toward him. The sound of the jug clattering on the ground made him turn, his expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. "Oh, I'm sorry," I said, rushing to pick it up, flustered. He chuckled softly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "No harm done. You all right?" I nodded, too embarrassed to meet his gaze. "Yeah, I wasn't looking where I was going." He smiled, and then, almost hesitantly, he added, "You're the girl who stays at the cottage, right?" I glanced up, catching his eyes. There was something in his gaze, something quiet, like he was searching for a connection, something more than just passing pleasantries. "Yeah," I said, still holding the jug in my hands. I'm staying with my grandmother. Her name's Rose." He nodded, and then, almost as if the words had slipped out before he could stop them, he said, "I'm Finn." It was a simple introduction, but somehow it felt monumental. Finn. The name lingered between us, soft and natural. "I've seen you out here before," I stammered, not sure what else to say. "Helping with the garden?" Finn looked down at the lavender as if lost in thought. "Yeah, just helping out. My uncle runs the farm nearby, and I give him a hand when I can." I nodded, thinking about what he'd said. "That's nice of you." He shrugged, a little shy, but his smile returned. "It's not much, really. Just, I like being around here. It's peaceful." For a long moment, we stood there, the air between us thick with the weight of unspoken things. His gaze shifted toward the lavender field again, but I wasn't sure if it was the flowers he was looking at or something deeper. "Do you like it here?" he asked, finally turning back to me. "I do," I said, glancing around at the field, at the cottage behind me. "It's calming. I've always loved this place." "I can tell," he said softly, "the way you look at it." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, as if unsure whether to continue. Then he smiled, his expression full of something gentle. "You've got that look, like you're part of it, like it's home." I didn't know what to say to that. It was strange, hearing someone else say what I'd always felt in my heart. The lavender had always been a part of me, something that tied me to this place, to my grandmother's cottage, to the summers spent here when I was younger. "I don't know," I murmured, my voice barely audible. "It's just always been here, part of me." Finn looked at me, his eyes searching mine for something. Then, without saying another word, he turned back toward the field, motioning for me to follow him. "You want to walk with me? It's a good day for it." For a moment, I hesitated, but then I nodded. I followed him into the lavender field, the air thick with the sweet scent of the flowers. We walked in silence, side by side, not needing words to fill the space between us. It felt as though everything had slowed down, as though the world outside the lavender field didn't matter. When we reached the far edge of the field, Finn stopped and looked at me, his expression suddenly serious. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like to just stay here? To not leave?" I swallowed, the question catching me off guard. "Sometimes." He nodded, his gaze distant, as though lost in his own thoughts. "I don't think I could stay here, not forever anyway." I glanced at him, unsure what he meant, but before I could ask, he smiled again, that gentle smile that seemed to make everything feel lighter. "I think I could," I said softly, looking around at the endless rows of lavender stretching out before us. For a moment, there was nothing but the wind, the scent of flowers, and the quiet company of each other. The mornings became our secret. Every day, like clockwork, I found myself waking before the sun, the air still cool with the remnants of the night. I'd slip quietly from the cottage, careful not to wake my grandmother, and head out to the lavender field, my feet crunching on the dry ground as I walked the familiar path. Finn was always there, waiting near the edge of the field, just as the first light of day began to paint the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. He never asked why I came, never questioned the way I looked at the field as if it were the most important thing in the world. And I never asked why he came either, though there was something in his eyes each time we met there, something unspoken, as if the lavender wasn't the only thing that had drawn us to this place. We didn't talk much at first, walking side by side in silence. But it wasn't an awkward silence. It was the kind of quiet that felt full, like we didn't need words to understand each other. The scent of the lavender hung heavy in the air, wrapping itself around us. The hum of bees became the soundtrack of our mornings. I could feel the connection growing with every step we took, with every shared moment in the stillness of the dawn. Sometimes we'd pick lavender together, its vibrant purple flowers blooming against the soft green of the plants. Finn would show me how to cut the stems just right, making sure not to damage the plants. His hands were gentle, steady, and each time our fingers brushed, it felt like a quiet spark, something that didn't need to be acknowledged, just felt. One morning, after we had finished picking a bundle of flowers, Finn turned to me with a soft smile. "Do you think it always smells like this here? Or is it just us?" I laughed, the sound ringing in the air. "I don't know, but it definitely feels different, doesn't it?" He nodded, his gaze lingering on me a little longer than usual. "It's like the world slows down when we're here, like nothing else matters." I stopped, looking at him, my heart fluttering in my chest. It was the way he said it, as if we were sharing something that was ours alone, a secret that only the lavender could hold. "You're right," I whispered. "It's like we're the only ones here." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I thought I saw something shift in his eyes, something deeper, something that mirrored what I was feeling. But before I could say anything, he started walking again, the moment slipping away like the wind through the lavender. We continued our walks, day after day. The mornings always the same, but always different in the way they made me feel. It was as though time had lost its meaning in the lavender field, and all that mattered was the space we created between us. The world outside the field was distant, irrelevant. Here, there was only Finn and me, surrounded by the wild beauty of lavender. And with every step, every shared silence, every glance exchanged, I felt myself falling into something I didn't understand but couldn't resist. It was a late afternoon when I first noticed the sadness in Finn's eyes. We were sitting by the edge of the field, the sun dipping low behind the hills, casting long shadows across the lavender. We had been talking about nothing in particular, the way we often did. Our conversations light and carefree, but as the breeze shifted, something about the way he looked at me changed. He stopped mid-sentence, his fingers tracing the edge of the lavender stems in front of him. His usual smile had faded, and there was a faraway look in his eyes, one I couldn't place. "Finn?" I said softly, my voice quieter than usual, sensing that something was wrong. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he seemed to withdraw into himself, as if the world around him had disappeared, leaving him alone with whatever thoughts clouded his mind. His jaw tightened slightly, and I noticed the way his hands trembled just a little as he continued to touch the flowers, his focus on them rather than on me. I reached out, placing my hand gently on his. He flinched at the touch, his gaze snapping back to me, startled. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the words hanging between us like a delicate thread. It was as if he wanted to say something but didn't know how. "You don't have to tell me," I murmured, my thumb gently brushing over his knuckles. "But if you want to, I'm here." Finn shifted, letting out a long, quiet breath. And for the first time, I realized how heavy the silence between us had become. There was a weight to it, an unspoken pain that I couldn't understand. He had always been so open with me, so willing to share little pieces of his life. But this was different. There was something he wasn't telling me, something I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. He trailed off, looking down at the lavender as if it held all the answers. "I'm not from here," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been working on this farm for a while now, but my family's not what you think." I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue, though a part of me feared what might come next. His eyes were distant, filled with memories he wasn't ready to share. "I've been running," he said after a pause, his voice cracking slightly. "From a lot of things. Things I can't fix. Things I'm not proud of." I couldn't help but feel a knot tighten in my chest. He wasn't just running from his family or this town. He was running from something deeper, something he couldn't face. And I didn't know if I was ready to uncover it. "You don't have to explain," I whispered, squeezing his hand. "I don't need to know everything. But if it hurts, I want you to know you don't have to carry it alone." For a long time, he said nothing, his gaze fixed on the ground. I wanted so badly to pull him out of his silence, to make him open up completely, but I knew I couldn't force it. Not yet. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he looked at me. "Maybe one day," he said quietly, "but not today." And for the rest of the evening, we sat in silence, the field around us still and peaceful, as if the lavender itself understood the weight of the moment. I didn't push him for more. I didn't ask him to explain further. All I could do was sit beside him, offering the quiet support that seemed to be all he needed. But the truth was there, lurking just beneath the surface, hidden in the quiet spaces between us, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. For now, though, I would wait. The storm arrived suddenly, as if it had been waiting just beyond the horizon, gathering strength in silence. I could feel the shift in the air long before the first raindrop fell, a heavy, charged stillness that seemed to press against my skin. Finn and I had been walking through the lavender, as we did every morning, but the sky had darkened quicker than expected. "I think we should head back," I said, my voice betraying the nervousness I felt as I looked up at the dark clouds that rolled across the sky. Finn didn't respond immediately. He was too caught up in the sound of the wind rustling through the lavender. I could hear the low rumble of thunder in the distance, and as the first drop of rain landed on my cheek, I turned and reached for his hand. The sudden chill in the air made the warmth of his touch even more comforting. Before I could say another word, the heavens opened, and the rain came pouring down in sheets. The wind howled, pushing the rain sideways as we ran for shelter. Finn led me toward the small shed at the far end of the field, where we had often hidden from the sun in the summer heat. This time, it was the storm that had driven us there. Inside the shed, the air was thick with the scent of wet wood and earth. I took a deep breath, letting the smell of rain-soaked lavender fill my lungs, and for a moment, I forgot about everything else. The world outside had disappeared, leaving us in a small, quiet space where nothing existed but the storm and each other. Finn stood by the doorway, his back pressed against the wood, looking out at the rain that was now pounding against the roof. His eyes, usually so open and free, were distant again, lost in some thought I couldn't reach. I wanted to ask him what was wrong, to tell him that he didn't have to carry whatever burden he had, but the words didn't come. "Are you okay?" I asked softly, though I already knew the answer. His silence said it all. He turned to me then, his face unreadable. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He just looked at me, as if weighing the truth of something he was about to say. "I never told you why I came here," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper over the sound of the rain. I watched him carefully, my heart picking up speed. His eyes held something dark, something heavy, but I knew that whatever it wasn't something he had shared with anyone before, not even with me. "I came here to get away," he continued, "from everything, from the mess I left behind. My family, my father, they all wanted me to stay, but I couldn't. I couldn't live in that house, in that place. It was too much. Too many memories. Too much pressure. The words were slow and halting, but each one seemed to pull him deeper into his past, revealing a piece of the puzzle that had been hidden for so long. I didn't speak. I didn't want to interrupt him, afraid that saying anything might cause him to close up again. I came here because I thought maybe if I could just start over, I'd find a way to be different. Finn continued, his voice quieter now. But it's not that simple. You don't just run away from things and hope they stay gone. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him that it wasn't his fault, that it was okay to not have everything figured out. But the words were stuck in my throat. I could see the pain in his eyes, the regret and sorrow that weighed on him. The storm outside seemed to mirror the storm inside him, a constant battle between what was and what could have been. You don't have to carry this alone, Finn, I said, stepping closer to him, my hand finding his once more. Whatever it is, you don't have to do it by yourself. For a moment, he didn't respond. He just stood there, his face turned toward the rain, as if searching for something in the downpour that would give him the answers he needed. But the storm outside was only growing stronger, and the longer we stood there in silence, the more I realized that there was no quick fix for the pain he was feeling. I know, he said finally, his voice almost too soft to hear. But I don't know how to let go, how to stop running. I reached out, gently cupping his face in my hands. You don't have to let go all at once. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. Just take it one step at a time. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be. He closed his eyes at my touch, and for a moment, the world outside the shed seemed to disappear. The rain, the lavender, the ache in his heart, they all faded into the background as I stood there with him, offering whatever comfort I could. And in that quiet space, as the storm raged outside, we were just two souls trying to find our way through the rain. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a soft golden glow across the lavender fields. It was one of those afternoons when the world seemed to stand still, where everything felt perfect in its imperfection. Finn and I stood at the edge of the field, the scent of the lavender thick in the air, mingling with the warmth of the fading sunlight. The storm from earlier had passed, leaving behind a freshness that seemed to make the world smell sweeter, feel softer. I could hear the gentle rustling of the lavender around us, the sound almost like a secret between the two of us. The world had quieted down, and in that silence, everything seemed to become more pronounced as presence. The way the breeze brushed against my skin, the way my heart was beating just a little faster than it should. Finn was standing just a few inches away, his eyes focused on the horizon, though I knew he wasn't really looking at anything. His thoughts seemed far away, as if he was lost in something deeper than the moment we were sharing. But there was something different in the way he stood now, a kind of tension that hadn't been there before. I had felt it growing for days, this unspoken understanding between us, an undeniable pull that seemed to draw us closer without either of us knowing what to do with it. I had always thought that love was something you could feel, something you could hold in your hands, but standing there, In that lavender field with Finn, I realized that love wasn't something you could grasp. It was something you could only feel in the spaces between words, in the moments when the silence spoke louder than any conversation could. Do you ever wonder if things could be different? Finn asked suddenly, his voice breaking the silence, though his tone seemed distant, almost as if he wasn't asking me directly. I turned to face him, meeting his eyes for the first time in what felt like hours. There was something in his gaze, something that made my heart race in a way it never had before. It was a look that was both familiar and foreign, a mixture of longing and hesitation. Different how? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Finn's lips parted, but he didn't immediately answer. His eyes flickered to the lavender and then back to me, as if he were trying to decide whether to say what was on his mind. The air between us seemed to thicken with unspoken words. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, making my breath catch in my chest. Finally, he stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. I don't know, just different. His voice faltered, and for the first time, I saw the vulnerability in him that he had kept hidden so carefully until now. I wanted to say something, to tell him that I understood, that I felt the same way, but the words were trapped in my throat, too tangled to make sense of. Instead, I simply reached out, my fingers brushing lightly against his arm. The contact was electric, sending a rush of warmth through my body, and I could see the way his breath caught at the touch. And then, without warning, he leaned in, slowly. So slowly that for a moment, I wondered if I had imagined it. My heart was pounding now, the sound of it so loud in my ears that I could barely hear the soft rustling of the lavender around us. He stopped just inches away, his lips hovering near mine, his breath mingling with mine in the still air. Time seemed to stretch out, every second feeling like an eternity. The world was so quiet now, except for the soft thrum of my heartbeat and the way my fingers tightened against the fabric of his shirt. It felt like we were teetering on the edge of something so fragile, so delicate, that one wrong move might shatter it all. I closed my eyes, holding my breath, waiting for him to close the distance between us. But just before our lips could meet, something shifted. A quiet hesitation passed through him, like a shadow crossing his face, and with a soft sigh, he pulled back, his eyes meeting mine with a kind of sadness that I couldn't place. "Sorry," he muttered, stepping back, his hands running through his hair in frustration. I shouldn't have." I stood there, my heart still racing, unsure of what to say. The space between us seemed so vast all of a sudden, the moment slipping away like sand through my fingers. But I didn't want to let it end like this. Not like this. I reached for him, my hand brushing his arm again. This time, he didn't pull away. "Finn, it's okay," I whispered, my voice shaking slightly. "We don't have to rush. We don't have to figure everything out right now." His gaze softened, and I saw something in his eyes, something vulnerable and raw. He wasn't ready for whatever this was between us, and I could feel the weight of that truth settle in the pit of my stomach. He started, but the words seemed to get lost in the air between us. I know, I replied gently. We're just figuring things out, one step at a time. Finn looked at me for a long moment, his expression softening. And for the first time, I saw him as he truly was, someone who was scared, someone who had been carrying too much for too long. But in that silence, in that space between us, I realized that we didn't have to have all the answers. We didn't have to rush into anything. The lavender surrounded us, the scent still lingering in the air, as if offering us the time we needed. For now, that was enough. We didn't need to force anything. We could just be. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most perfect thing of all. The late afternoon sun stretched its golden fingers across the lavender field, casting long shadows that seemed to dance with the breeze. The lavender swayed gently, their sweet scent filling the air and mingling with the last traces of the summer heat. Finn and I walked in silence, our footsteps soft against the earth. We had just parted ways after spending the morning in the field, where we shared another secret moment under the canopy of lavender. But this time, there was a quiet unease between you, something I couldn't name but felt in the way he avoided looking at me directly. The sun had begun to dip lower, and the day was turning toward evening when we decided to take a break by the edge of the field. Finn lowered himself onto the old wooden fence that ran along the property, his elbows resting on his knees, his eyes distant. I sat beside him, the soft grass tickling my bare legs, and for a moment, I simply watched him, trying to read his thoughts. But before I could ask him what was on his mind, I heard the familiar rustle of footsteps behind me. I turned to see my aunt, her expression unreadable. There was a certain way she walked, with her eyes fixed ahead and her mouth set in a thin line, that told me she had something important to say. "I thought I'd find you here," she said, her voice sharp but not unkind. Her gaze flickered over to Finn before returning to me. "You know, it's getting late. You should be heading back soon." I glanced at Finn, who hadn't yet looked up from the ground. My heart twisted in my chest. I knew my aunt had been watching us, had been keeping an eye on the growing bond between us, though she hadn't said anything until now. Her warning was implicit, hanging in the air like a dark cloud. "I know," I replied, but there was a part of me that didn't want to Lebanon yet. The field, Finn, the warmth of the afternoon, it all felt like something I didn't want to let go of. "We're just enjoying the sunset." My aunt's eyes softened for a moment, and she sighed, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "Be careful, dear. Some things aren't meant to last, no matter how much we wish they would." The words hit me like a cold gust of wind, and I shivered, despite the warmth of the evening. I knew she was talking about Finn, though she hadn't said it outright. My aunt had always been practical, matter of fact, and I had a sense that she was warning me about something she had seen before, fleeting summer romance that would burn bright and fade just as quickly. "Why do you say that?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a slow step forward, her gaze lingering on Finn for a moment longer than I was comfortable with. Then she looked at me again, her eyes full of something I couldn't quite read. It was concern, maybe, or maybe it was just the wisdom that comes with age. A wisdom I hadn't fully appreciated until now. "He's leaving at the end of the summer," she said, her voice almost a whisper, as if she didn't want anyone else to hear. "His family's moving away, and he won't be here for long." I felt the weight of her words settle over me, heavy and unrelenting. My heart sank, and a lump formed in my throat. I had known that Finn was different, that he carried something with him that I couldn't quite understand, but I hadn't realized how much he was holding back, how little time we actually had. I don't care about that," I said, though the words felt foreign on my tongue. "We're just spending time together." My aunt's face softened, but there was still a sadness in her eyes. "I know you don't, but sometimes we need to protect our hearts, sweetheart. Not every summer love is meant to last. Some are just meant to teach us something, to show us a feeling we didn't know we were capable of, and then they fade, and we move on." I wanted to argue with her, to tell her that what Finn and I had wasn't like that it was different. But the words stuck in my throat, and I felt a deep, painful truth settling in my chest. My aunt wasn't wrong, and I knew it. She patted me once more on the shoulder before turning to leave, her footsteps slow and measured. "Just remember, dear," she called over her shoulder, her voice gentle but firm. "It's okay to love, but it's also okay to let go." I watched her disappear into the house, the evening air growing cooler in her absence. My gaze turned back to Finn, who had finally looked up from the ground, his eyes meeting mine. But the distance between us now felt wider, like an invisible barrier had been placed between us that neither of us knew how to cross. I wanted to say something to him, to tell him that I didn't care about the warnings, about the inevitable end to this summer. But I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat, tangled up with the weight of everything my aunt had said. Finn stood up slowly, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "I should probably get going," he said, his voice quieter than usual, the edge of sadness in his tone unmistakable. I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, me too." We walked in silence, side by side, through the lavender field one last time. The scent of the flowers surrounded us, and for a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. But the silence between us was thick with unspoken words, with feelings we both knew but didn't know how to voice. As we reached the edge of the field, Finn turned to me, his eyes lingering on mine. "I'll see you tomorrow?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure if we would. The summer was slipping away, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on both of us. "Tomorrow," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And with that, he walked away, disappearing into the fading light, leaving me standing alone in the lavender field, the scent of it lingering in the air, and the memory of his touch still fresh on my skin. The morning was still and quiet, the kind of stillness that made everything feel suspended in time. The lavender, once vibrant under the sun, now swayed lazily under the overcast sky, as though waiting for something. I walked into the field that day, my heart already anticipating the familiar sound of Finn's voice, the soft rustling of the lavender as he made his way through it. I hadn't seen him yet that morning, but it was early just after dawn and he usually came by now. But as I reached the edge of the field, where the lavender thickened and the path we'd walked so many times began, I realized something was wrong. There was no sign of him. No footsteps, no laughter, no rustling in the bushes, just the quiet hum of the early morning. I waited for a while, standing where we'd always met, my hand resting on the wooden fence that separated the field from the house. The scent of lavender surrounded me, but it felt different, tooty heavier, more distant. The usual warmth that I had always felt when I was with Finn seemed to be slipping away, replaced by an unfamiliar chill. Minutes passed. I glanced at my watch. He was late, which wasn't like him. But I told myself that maybe he'd gotten held up, or maybe he was still inside, just a little longer than usual. But another hour passed, and still no sign of him. I began to walk through the rows of lavender, calling his name softly at first, then louder as I moved deeper into the field. Finn! Finn! Where are you? The wind picked up slightly, carrying the scent of lavender with it, swirling it around me. But there was no reply. I felt the panic start to creep in, a tightening in my chest that I couldn't explain. I thought of the things my aunt had said, and of the warnings I hadn't paid enough attention to. Not every summer love is meant to last. But I hadn't thought it would happen like this, not so suddenly, not without any explanation. I searched for hours. The sun was already higher in the sky by the time I reached the farthest edge of the field, where the river ran silently through the trees. I hadn't expected to find him there. He had never been the type to go near the river, but I had to check. Maybe he was lost in thought. Maybe he was hiding from something I didn't understand. But there was nothing. No trace of him. No sign of his presence anywhere. By the time I returned to the house I had spent so many summers in, the place where my heart had learned to feel, I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. I stood on the porch, staring out at the lavender field, my mind racing. What had happened? Where was Finn? Why had he disappeared without a word? I tried to make sense of it, tried to explain away the silence, the absence. Maybe he'd gone into town. Maybe something had come up. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I knew that this wasn't just a missed meeting, a delay in our plans. This felt different. This felt like an ending. I stood there for what felt like hours, but still, he didn't come. No sign, no message, nothing. The lavender swayed in the wind, and for the first time, it felt like a graveyard, a reminder of everything that had slipped through my fingers. A finality settled over me, cold and undeniable. And just like that, Finn was gone. The weeks that followed were an odd blur of time. Every day, I would wake up with the same quiet ache in my chest. The same unanswered question lingering in the back of my mind. Where did he go? I hadn't heard a word from Finn since that morning in the lavender field. No explanation, no goodbye. He had simply vanished, and I had no answers. In the evenings, I would sit at the small desk by the window in the cottage, the soft, fading light casting long shadows across the room. I found myself staring at the blank page in front of me, the same thought running through my head. I should write to him, but no words seemed to come. How could I explain how it felt to have him disappear, to have him leave without any sign? So I started writing anyway, not knowing exactly what I was trying to say. The first letter came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I wrote about the field, about the way the lavender smelled when we walked together through it, how the sunlight had danced on his hair as we laughed. I wrote about the way his smile made everything feel more alive, and how the silence between us sometimes felt more intimate than any words could. But I never sent it. The second letter came the following week. I poured my feelings into the pages, more raw this time, as I began to admit that I might never see him again. I wrote about the emptiness I felt, how strange it was to walk through the lavender without him by my side. I wrote about the fear I hadn't acknowledged before. The fear that I had missed my chance at something real. I didn't want to believe he was gone for good, but deep down, I knew the truth. Still, I didn't send it. The letters piled up over the weak sun. 2, then 3, then 5. I had written so many words, each one a little more desperate, a little more hopeful. In the quiet of the nights, when the world outside was still, I would read them again, each letter a small piece of my heart, preserved in ink and paper. And when I was done, I would fold them neatly and tuck them away into the shoebox under my bed, where they would remain hidden, waiting for something I couldn't name. I never told anyone about the letters. Not my grandmother, not my aunt, not even my mother. I didn't want them to see the vulnerability in me, the part of me that had been so foolish to fall in love with someone who could disappear just as easily as he had come into my life. The letters became my secret, a quiet reflection of everything I had lost, and everything I still hoped for. But with each passing day, the hope faded a little more. The lavender fields outside my window bloomed and withered, and the seasons changed, but Finn never returned. The box under my bed remained untouched, filled with words that would never be read. I had closed that chapter of my life, or so I thought. And yet, those letters stayed with mesallic reminders of the love that never had a chance to fully bloom. I remember the day I left that cottage as though it were yesterday. The sun was setting behind the hills, casting long shadows across the lavender field. I had packed my things in silence, the weight of the season hanging heavy in the air. The scent of lavender lingered in the corners of the house, in the folds of my clothes, in the deepest corners of my memory. But it wasn't enough to hold me there. Life had a way of moving forward, no matter how much I wanted to stay in the past. I had promised myself that I would return to the city, to the world I knew, the world of school, of friends, of expectations. But nothing about that world felt right anymore. The familiar rhythms of city life felt strange against the quiet that had settled into my bones. I longed for the fields, for the sound of the breeze rustling through the lavender, for the carefree moments that had once made me feel alive. But most of all, I longed for Finn. As the train rumbled toward the city, I found myself staring out of the window, the lavender fields slowly fading into the distance. The further I got from the cottage, the more distant the memories felt, as if they were slipping away, just out of reach. The words I had written to him sat unopened in that shoebox under my bed. I had never sent them. And now, I wasn't sure I ever would. Perhaps it was better that way. Perhaps it was better to let go of the past. The city greeted me with its noise, its haste, its endless pace, but nothing felt the same. I went back to school, threw myself into my studies, hung out with my friends, but the lavender fields were never far from my mind. Finn was never far from my thoughts. It was as though a part of me had stayed behind, in that small, quiet cottage, surrounded by the wild lavender. When I opened my suitcase that night, I was surprised to find a sprig of lavender tucked carefully in the folds of my clothes. It was a small, simple thing, but it carried the scent of that summer of the warmth, the laughter, and the love that had come so unexpectedly. I pressed it between the pages of my notebook, a small, delicate memory that would stay with me, even as I moved forward with my life. But I knew deep down that I could never forget. The lavender would always be a part of me, a reminder of a love that had been fleeting, but real. A love that had bloomed in the fields and faded as quickly as the season. Years passed. It wasn't the kind of time you can mark with precise moments, but rather a collection of days, each one folding into the next, until they blurred into a long, quiet stretch of life. I grew older naturally, and with that came new experiences, college, new friends, love, and loss. I married, as was expected, and had children. The city life that once felt foreign began to settle around me. My career took shape, and for a while, I convinced myself that the lavender fields were nothing but a memory, just a beautiful but fleeting chapter of my youth. Yet there were moments, small, almost imperceptible, that called me back. In the quiet of the night, when the weight of the world felt too heavy, I would sometimes catch the faintest scent of lavender. It would drift through the air, filling my senses with memories. I would close my eyes, and for a brief moment, I was back there, back in the field, back in the cottage, back in the summer of 16. Finn's face would appear before me, his laughter ringing in my ears, and my heart would ache in a way I could never explain. But life went on. I couldn't afford to stay lost in the past. I had a family now, children to care for, a future to build. So I kept moving forward, putting one foot in front of the other, until I had almost forgotten the girl I had been, until I had almost forgotten him. It was during those years, as I settled into this new version of my life, that the thought of Finn became something I would push aside. He was the boy of my youth, the first love, the one that would always be part of me but never part of my future. I didn't need him anymore. I had my own family now. I was someone else. But there, in the quietest moments, when the house was still and the lights dimmed, I would catch myself wondering if he had ever thought of me, wondering if he too had carried a sprig of lavender tucked somewhere deep inside his life. And then one day, a postcard arrived. It came in a simple envelope postmarked from Provence. No name, no return address. Just an image of a lavender field wild, untamed and endless. The caption beneath the picture was brief, but it hit me harder than I ever expected. Do you still remember the scent? There it was again, the lavender. That scent, that symbol of everything I had left behind. I knew, in that moment, that he had thought of me. Finn had sent this postcard, and in his words, I heard echoes of the summer we'd shared. The boy I once knew had never truly left me. Not in the way I had convinced myself. He had carried the memory too. I held the postcard in my hands, my fingers trembling slightly. After all these years, the lavender had found its way back to me. The years had worn me down in ways I hadn't anticipated. My marriage had faltered, the cracks deepening over time, until there was no more pretending, no more trying to fix what had long been broken. My children had grown up and left home, each of them chasing their own dreams, leaving me in the quiet space of an empty nest. The house, once full of laughter, now stood still, like a relic of a life I had outgrown. I found myself sorting through old boxes in the attic, a task I had put off for years. As I cleared out the clutter, my hands brushed against a shoebox, tucked away beneath layers of dust and forgotten memories. I hesitated for a moment before pulling it down, the weight of it unfamiliar, as if it had been waiting for me to rediscover it. Inside, I found things I had long since buried: old letters, photographs, trinkets. But it was the letters that stopped me cold. The shoebox had been filled with the letters I had never sent to Finn. The ones I had written in the days after he disappeared from my life. All the words I had kept hidden away, afraid to send them. Afraid of what they might mean. I hadn't realized how much I'd kept of him, how much I had never let go. The scent of lavender still lingered faintly on the pages, as if time had never really passed. As I read through the letters, the pain of that summer flooded back. I could almost hear his voice, feel his hand in mine, the warmth of his skin as we had walked together through the rows of lavender. But life had pulled us apart. He had left. I had moved on. Or so I thought. Sitting there, in the attic, I realized how much of myself I had locked away in this box. I had buried my feelings, my memories, under the weight of obligations and new roles. But Finn, and the summer we had shared, had never truly left me. Not completely. With a sigh, I gathered the letters into my arms. I could feel the heaviness of what I had carried for so long, the grief of love lost. The longing for something that never truly had a chance. And yet, in this moment of quiet reflection, I realized something else. I had found something too. Something I had lost long ago, the girl I once was, the one who loved fiercely, without hesitation or fear. I wasn't that woman anymore, but I could still be her in some way. I could still carry that love with me, even if it was only in memory. As I folded the letters back into the box, I knew it was time to let go, to move forward, but also to honor the past. I had lived a life, and now it was time to live it fully. I closed the box and set it aside. And in that quiet moment, I felt a soft breeze, carrying with it the faintest scent of lavender. Years had passed since I last stood at the foot of my grandmother's cottage, but as I approached it once again, it felt as though time had folded upon itself. The world around me had changed, had shaped me into someone different, but the cottage's small, humble, nestled between the rows of lavender had remained unchanged. It stood as it had all those years ago, though the once vibrant yellow paint on the walls had faded to a soft, sun-kissed beige. The roof sagged just slightly, as if bearing the weight of countless summers. But the lavender, wild and untamed, still grew thick and lush, its scent filling the air and tugging at the deepest parts of my soul. I stepped onto the porch, my footsteps slow and deliberate, as if I were entering a sacred space. The familiar creak of the floorboards underfoot sent a jolt of nostalgia through me. I could almost hear the echoes of my grandmother's voice calling me inside. Her laughter carried on the wind, her hands brushing the dust from the windowsill. Inside, the cottage felt smaller than I remembered. Everything seemed to shrink in the face of time. The rooms more cramped than the spaciousness I had once felt. The old rocking chair by the hearth, where my grandmother used to sit and weave her stories, now stood empty, its wood worn smooth by years of use. But the lavender, it hadn't changed. It still thrived, untamed and free, just as it had that summer. I opened the door to the back porch and stepped out into the garden, my heart pounding in my chest. The sight of the lavender field before me seemed to breathe life into every memory I had locked away. The sound of the wind rustling through the flowers, the sun warming my skin, the quiet hum of nature surrounding me was all the same. I walked slowly, my fingers brushing against the lavender as I made my way to the very spot where Finn and I had once sat, sharing stories and dreams under the vast, endless sky. The air was thick with the scent of lavender, and for a moment, I could almost hear his voice again, soft and tender, like a whisper carried on the breeze. But as I reached the spot, I realized how much had changed. The lavender was still wild, but the boy I had once known, he was gone. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, and let the scent of the lavender wash over me. The pain, the longing, it was all still there, deep within me, but it no longer felt like a wound. It was a memory now, a part of me I could carry forward. And in this quiet moment, standing in the field where so much had been left behind, I felt a sense of peace. Finn may have vanished from my life all those years ago, but the love we shared, however brief, had stayed with me. It had become a part of who I was, and it always would be. After I had walked through the lavender field, the familiar scent swirling around me like a bittersweet memory, I wandered back to the small cottage. The sunlight was starting to dip, casting long, lazy shadows across the ground. The air held that fragile quality of dusk, where time seemed to pause just long enough to allow a brief, quiet reflection. Inside, I found the guest book, tucked away on the old wooden shelf in the living room. My grandmother had kept it for as long as I could remember. It had been a place where friends and family, strangers passing through, had written their names, their thoughts, their stories. I had signed it myself years ago. As a child, though, I could barely recall the words I had scrawled, my handwriting so innocent and full of wonder. I sat down at the little table in the corner of the room, the guest book open in front of me. As my fingers traced over the pages, I felt the weight of the past pressing gently against my chest. There were names I recognized, old family friends, cousins, the faces from long ago. And then, near the end of the book, my eyes caught something strange. A single name, a date from last summer, and beneath it, a short note. I hoped she'd come back. I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. My breath caught in my throat. The writing was familiar, almost haunting. It was Finn's handwriting, I was sure of it. It was a message for me, a message from the past, from the boy I had loved and lost in this very field. The realization hit me like a rush of wind, and for a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Why had he left this behind? Had he come back to the cottage, searching for me in the same way I had searched for him all those years? Was this his way of telling me that, despite everything, he had never truly forgotten me? I turned the page, my hands trembling. The guest book remained open in front of me, the words echoing in my mind. I hoped she'd come back. The very words I had longed to hear, the ones that had lingered like a whisper on the edge of my dreams. And for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope stir within Mia. Hope that perhaps some things, some loves, never truly fade. They only wait. Wait for the right moment, the right time, for them to bloom once again. I stood at the edge of the field, the lavender stretching before me in soft rolling waves of purple. The sun was low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the flowers, and for a moment everything felt still, frozen in time, as if the world had decided to pause, just for me. Just for this moment. The field was as wild as it had always been, its untamed beauty unchanged, untouched by the passing years. The wind rustled through the lavender, sending a wave of fragrance into the air, rich and full of memories. I could feel it deep in my bones, scent, the warmth, the sense of home I had always carried with me. I closed my eyes, allowing the gentle breeze to sweep over my face. The soft hum of the world around me became a lullaby, soothing and familiar. It was the same lavender, the same field where I had first met him, where everything had changed. In the silence, I spoke softly, my voice barely a whisper against the breeze. "Do you hear me, Finn?" I asked, though I knew he couldn't answer. "Do you still remember this place? The wild lavender, the sun, the laughter we shared?" The wind seemed to respond, rustling the lavender in a way that felt like an answer, like a sigh from the past. It was as if the field itself held the memories of those days, those fleeting moments of love, of youth, of a time when the world was simpler, and we were simply two souls caught in the warmth of a summer. I stepped into the field, my feet brushing against the lavender, and I let myself be enveloped by it. The flowers, still wild, still free, seemed to welcome me back, as if they too had been waiting all these years, waiting for me to return, to remember, to feel once more. As I walked deeper into the field, I could almost hear his voice, soft and distant, like a dream. I smiled, feeling the warmth of that memory wrap around me. Not all love needs an ending, I thought. Sometimes it just needs to be felt again. I closed my eyes and breathed in deeply, the scent of lavender filling my lungs. I could feel him beside me again, his presence as real as the earth beneath my feet. And in that moment, I knew that love, true love, never really leaves us. It lingers in the spaces between breaths, in the quiet moments when we least expect it. The lavender would always grow wild, just as our love had. Unfettered, untamed, and beautiful in its own right. She walks to the field, her footsteps soft on the earth that has known her for so many years. The lavender, wild and unruly, stretches as far as the eye can see, its vibrant purple hues dotting the landscape like a sea of color. Despite the years, the air still smells like summer, like warmth, and like memories that linger, stubborn and sweet. The sun is beginning to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows over the rows of flowers, and for a moment she can almost see him standing there, just as he had, leaning against the weathered fence, watching the clouds drift by. She inhales deeply, the scent of lavender flooding her senses, bringing with it a rush of memories so vivid they almost hurt. Her heart tightens, but there's a softness to the ache, a quiet understanding that all those years of longing were never for a person, but for a feeling, a time when the world was wide open and anything seemed possible. The field feels sacred, almost as if it holds pieces of her past within its blooms. She runs her fingers through the lavender, the smooth petals brushing against her skin, and for the first time in many years, she feels something she thought she had lost: peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from acceptance. The wind rustles through the flowers, carrying with it whispers of a love she never had the chance to fully understand. And yet, she knows it was hers, in its own way. As the evening light deepens, she sits down on the soft grass, her back against the old wooden fence. Her eyes close, and she lets the lavender wash over her, just as it had all those years ago. She speaks to the wind as if he were still here, his presence lingering in the air. Not all love needs an ending, she whispers, her voice barely audible above the breeze. Some just need to be felt again. The scent of lavender wraps around her like an old friend, comforting and familiar. She smiles softly, a quiet joy filling her chest. She doesn't need closure, not in the way she once thought. The love, the longing, the what ifs, they're all here, in this field, in this moment. And in that silence, she feels him, not physically, but in every swaying bloom, in every fragrant breeze. As she rises and walks back toward the cottage, she knows that she has found what she came for. The lavender will always be here, wild and untamed, just as their love had been. But now, she's no longer the girl who waited for something that could never be. She's the woman who has learned that some loves don't need to be held onto, they need only to be remembered.